You are looking live at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, commemorating the exact moment, close to the exact moment, 75 years ago today. It was a bright and clear, perfect morning before the Japanese launched what would be an unforgettable attack on that base. 350 Imperial Japanese fighter planes and bombers and torpedo planes in two waves. Some say a third wave was stopped at the last second. Launched from 6 aircraft carriers on our men and women at that base. They took out virtually our entire Pacific fleet, and with it 2,300 largely young lives overboard the Arizona, where the remains of 1,000 are entombed. The average age was 19. To former NSA Director General Keith Alexander on the significance of that day, on this day, and the threat that is still real. It's just different threats, General. And I was reading through old press, if you'll indulge me, sir, at the time, that talked about quick sacrifices many Americans were immediately willing and happy to make, including higher taxes, including buying up any war bonds they could to pay for that effort, regardless of party, regardless of economic status. Very different time. What do you make of that?
Well, I do think it was a different time, and I think what you put on the table is hopefully for cybersecurity and terrorism, we don't need a Pearl Harbor-like event to bring our nation together, both government and industry, like we had back then. We should learn from those lessons. You know, it's incredible what you bring out when you think about how our nation has advanced since World War II, that greatest generation that brought us here today. Think about what they did. It's amazing. Now, how do we learn from those lessons for some of these areas like cybersecurity and terrorism that are going on, I think is what we need to take on.
You know, General, I was thinking about it. I guess we didn't have the NSA back in those days. You're a former NSA director. But we could have used, obviously, better intelligence, probably. That's an understatement. But we have pretty good intelligence now on cyber threats worldwide. We've already seen what's been happening. We've already seen the active terrorists on the move worldwide. But we don't have a focused enemy, as we did at the time in responding to the Japanese, responding to the war in Europe, and joining the fight against the Germans, the Nazis. Does that hurt us in that we can't focus on one entity?
Well, I think it does. I think it makes it more difficult for people to commit resources and times into solving this in Congress, industry, and in our government. But we need to overcome that for just the reasons that you point out. You know, the Internet, many have said, has gone from the Internet of Things to a capability where all our intellectual property, our wealth, everything is stored. Our government, everything that we have now is stored on that Internet. We depend on it for power, for finance, for government. If we lose that, or if that's interrupted, it will have a huge impact on our country. So we need to look at this differently. You think about what's changed in this election, just with Twitter and some of these things.
Right.
Think about how quickly our world is changing and how vulnerable we are in this space.
I always wondered, too, how we would respond if there was a nationwide cyber attack. I doubt we would respond the same way we did after Pearl Harbor. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but we marshal our forces for causes that seem worth it, and back then that was very much worth it. All stripes agreed. Here, I can actually see this playing out on cable news shows with panels arguing, is this worth, you know, upping our ante and responding as we did in past crises? I think it would be every bit as important and maybe twice as scary, but I don't know if it'd get the same amount of, you know, priority. What do you think?
Well, actually, it depends on how that attack occurs, against which sector or sectors that it hits on is how we would react. I think one of the things that is correct, we want our President and Secretary of Defense to reserve the option to figure out how to respond to such an attack. So Cyber Command and the other combatant commanders would give the Secretary of Defense and the President options, and it would stem all the way from diplomatic through all these range of military options. I don't think that's bad to have that as the approach that we take. What we do need to do, though, is we have to get together, industry and government, and figure out if this occurs, what can and should we be doing together to prevent it? I think a lot of this is preventable, and we should get out in front of that. We shouldn't get to a point where we have, as Secretary Panetta said, a Pearl Harbor in cyberspace. We shouldn't have that.
General,
we should stop that now.
I'm sorry, sir. Well, I've got you here. Your thoughts on Donald Trump taking this phone call from the leader of Taiwan? It's got the Chinese upset. He's already looking to name Terry Branstad, we're told, the Iowa governor, to be our ambassador to China. But it's still a lot of ruffled feathers there. Do you worry that our relations with China could get dicey, as if they're not already, in the Trump administration?
No. I think what the president-elect has the opportunity to do is look at this in a new way, from a business perspective. And I think there are actually opportunities that we have with China, if you look at how we're going to conduct business, to solve problems like the South China Sea, and get to a responsible partnership that is not so military focused, but more commercial. Can we do that? Should we do that? And does that help us? And I think the answer is, actually, our country partnering with China, we both benefit. Now I think the question, and President-elect Trump is far better than this than I am, is under what conditions and how do we do that? And I think we have an opportunity. So I'm not sure where this will go, but I think that opportunity is something that this president-elect uniquely brings to office, and is something that hopefully will be leveraged for the good of our country and others.
We can hope. General, thank you. I hope you have yourself a Merry Christmas. Thanks for your service to the country as well.